Hey there, YouTube. It's me, Broken Terrain, and I've got an amazing video for you this week. Check it out. Modular magnetic terrain that you can put together in so many different ways. Your table will be constantly full. And I'm going to show you how to do it after the drop. This idea started at the sketch pad, and this is my blueprint. I'm going to have some large beams, 3 different sizes for 3 stories. I've got several different sized walls I'm going to make, starting with full walls and then going down to ruined walls. And I've got some floor sections because you need that height. You're going to need magnets. Lots of magnets, and I've got a link in the description on where you can score a great set of 100 magnets. I've also got a doorway and windows section all set up, so let's start with that. Let's get our templates going. These templates are 3 inches tall and 10 inches wide. These are going to serve as our templates for all the wall sections. We're going to need 2. We're going to do a doorway section and we're going to do a windows section. I'm going to do 1-inch wide windows. The fender washer helps with the arch across the top. Here they are, all cut out. And I've also got a decorative beam cut out, and I'll show you how important that is later on in the build. I started by ripping 1-inch by 1-inch beams and 1/2-inch by 1/2-inch beams. These are important pieces for the structure of our modular and magnetic runes. Once they've been milled out to 1 by 1 inch, you're going to go in and mark, score, and use the pen to decorate the beams in 1-inch by 1-inch by 1-inch blocks. Break the edges with an X-Acto, roll with tin foil for texture. These beams were very important to the build, but with the scoring done to them, they were weakened in structure. So I took some barbecue skewers, sharpened the edges, and put them all the way through just to strengthen the foam and make sure that it didn't snap at any of the new weak points I created with the scoring. Now we turn back to my sketch pad, and you'll see I've got several measurements where the magnets lie. I'll be placing magnets on all 4 sides at the 1-inch, 2.5-inch, 4.5-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, and 9.5-inch spaces. Now this is my large pillar. I'm only doing 1 of these at the moment. But the best part about this whole project is that you can expand it based on your needs. If you want even more larger buildings, do more of these large 11-inch pillars. If you want smaller ruins, focus on the 4-inch pieces. And if you want a couple 2-story, don't forget that 7.5-inch pillar. See, I'm burying magnets in all 4 sides of these pillars, and it's the same process. Push the magnet in, dig a little hole for it, hot glue it in, and then cover it with a thin bit of hot glue just to seal it into the pillar. This project uses a ton of magnets, and these pillars are a big reason. But it's necessary, and I'll show you why. Here you see a 3.5-inch pillar or one of the 4-inch pillar pieces. This is just a single story piece. You gotta make sure you get all 4 sides and make sure those magnets are all facing the same way. The polarity needs to stay the same. A little trick I used, I had the magnets lined up in a row and the magnet side facing out, I put a little pop of black Sharpie on top, and that helped me keep track of my magnets at a glance. Here you see my 4 pillars, an 11, a 7, a 3.5, and a 4 with magnets on all 4 sides. That's the backbone of this project. With the pillars done, it's time to start working on the actual walls. I took out my texture roller. I showed that off in last video. And I'm gonna lay down some real quick, fantastic texture on this dollar store foam board. And I'm getting a whole lot better at using this texture roller. Look at that deep, sexy texture. Go over the top very lightly with some tin foil just to give those bricks some texture. Now when I pressed so hard with the texture roller, the dollar store foam actually kind of curled up, but that's okay. When I glue 2 pieces together, they're going to curve against each other and straighten out. And now it's time to put the magnets in the side. Look at that, YouTube. You think you know where I'm going with this? Oh, I bet you do. How'd I do that? The same process as I've used in the past. Put those magnets attached, then push them in to where you want to go. They'll leave a nice little ghosted mark. Trim that mark out, glue those magnets in, and cover them with just a thin bit of hot glue to seal them in. I did this using one single pillar with all the magnets, making sure to face them in the correct polarity, because you want all the walls to connect to all the pillars. That's probably the most important part. Make sure all your magnets are lining up to the correct polarity. Very important. Once that's completed, it's time to do the tops of the walls. And these are the 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch strips. Go through and mark them in 1/2 inch bricks. Break those edges with an X-Acto. Texture with tin foil. And then we're going to bury these magnetic nuts within these pieces. You're going to bury one at the 1 inch mark. To do that, I trimmed off 1 inch of brick. Push the nut down, much like I do with magnets. I had to draw that one. I had trouble seeing the shape. Carefully cut that shape out. Pull just enough out so that only half of the nut is countersunk in. And do the same thing to the other side of your foam strip. And then you're going to glue the nut in and then glue the 2 pieces together. And this is going to allow for magnets to attach to this part of the build. You're going to do this at the 1 inch and 3 inch spaces of both sides. Fun fact, I had originally intended for these to be magnets on all 4 of the sides, much like the 1 inch piece. However, the magnets were so strong that when I tried to stick the same polarity out, the magnets would pull away and actually rip out of the pillar. So the nuts ended up being the way I solved this problem. And they work really well. So a little tip from me to you. Now the fun part, we get to watch as the piece really starts to come alive. We're going to use those templates from earlier. I took my drawings and put them on a nice thick chipboard. I sketched out the windows and doors, and then I trimmed those out. With the windows and doors all cut out, you get to attach your 1/2 inch top piece with the the nuts buried in the 1 inch and 3 inch locations from both sides. That was a window section. Here's a door section. Exact same process, just different shapes. And you know me, YouTube, once I get a project to a certain point, I like to start playing with it, making sure it's going to do what I want. Oh man, this is looking good. So it's time to work on decorating those ugly cut doorways and windows. We're going to do that by cutting 1/2 inch strips of the dollar store foam, measuring out the correct size, then removing and creating a brickwork pattern so that it looks like the door is made of several different stones all lined up in a decorative fashion. I used the first one as a template for the others. This worked well. Because of the larger, easier to work with spaces for the doorways, I was able to use hot glue to fashion them in place. Once in place, I go back over those cuts that I had made previous with the pen and exaggerate it. And of course, don't forget your tin foil for texture. Onto the windows. They were much harder to work with because it was a much smaller space, but I still did relatively the same thing. I used a little 1 inch piece for the bottom of the sill. I bent and measured out a piece of 1/2 inch dollar store foam and then used it as a template so that I could create many more for all the different windows. And then because this was such a small, difficult spot to work in, I had to use Eileen's white tacky glue to hold those in place. But that worked out well. Now while that's drying, let's work on those modular floor sections. I measure a 1/4 inch from one side and one bottom, and then I measure up an inch grid. This is going to be the largest of my floor sections, a 6 inch by 6 inch piece. And I'm just going to create a jagged, ruined edge to make it look like ruins. At that point, you go in with your X-Acto, create a decorative jagged edge, and then because my top is tiled, I like to make it look like the tiles are separate from the subfloor. So I'll go in and create a thin line around that ruined edge and really exaggerate the tile. And then it's time to add, oh Ren, what are you doing? It's time to add the magnets to the floor sections. You're going to put one on the 1 inch and one on the 3 inch side of both sides. The second flaw in my design was that the magnets from the walls were not enough to hold such a large floor section up. So, using the nuts, I bury the nuts in 3 locations. Right now you only see one, as this is a test. And then I create, using some of those 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch pieces I had milled earlier, small little support columns. I'll bury a magnet in the top of one side, and now I have a quick little support to help hold the floor section up. So now the magnets hold it on the sides, and a thin little pillar holds the middle of the jutting out area. But that wasn't quite working either. So, using this small decorative column template that I had cut out earlier, I go to my table, I mill out some 1/4 inch decorative columns, and then I glue them into place. They create a little lip that the ceiling tile can then rest upon. So the combination of magnets and lips from the decorative columns, and then the center column, really hold these ceiling pieces in well. And this is going to allow you to place lots of miniatures on them, because that's the point. You want your miniatures to have different elevations, different heights to battle from. Archers need places to stand up high and pepper down arrow death on those poor melee folk on the floor. So we have to make sure that these ceiling pieces can hold several figures. Here you see me working on a smaller 4x4. That's 4 inches along both sides, and then a nice ruined edge. And then you get to be artistic. Go in, mess your tiles up, add some damage. You know, did the rubble collapse and fall on it? What happened? Make the story up in your mind as you go and create some fun, wonderful looking ceiling pieces. And here you see them sitting on my walls. Oh man, I'm getting so excited, YouTube. Check this out. And this is a step I was actually a little nervous about doing. I had all these beautiful full-sized wall sections, and now I was going to ruin them so that they were ruins. Yeah, I was pretty concerned, but it does turn out all right. So follow with me, YouTube. According to my plans, I am going to have 2 full 10-inch wall sections. So 2 of them, 1 door and 1 window, I won't touch. Then I'm going to have 2 8-inch sections. So that means the bottom is 8 inches, and it will ruin diagonally on one side up to 6 or down to 6 inches. And then I'll use that 2-inch side cut as a small wall, because why not? I built it, it's got magnets, and it's ready to go. I'm also going to do some 6-inch to 4-inch sections and use that other side to turn them into 4 going up to 2-inch sections. Boy, I hope I'm getting that information across well. For example, that was a 8 to 6 inch. and I took the top of the remaining, if you see it's 4 across the top and 2 on the bottom, I just kind of turned it into a 2-inch section. But don't throw away those offcuts, those bits and pieces that you're cutting off your walls. We're going to use those to enhance the rest of it by creating some interesting looking scatter that matches the terrain. Here I'm using a wall piece to create a 4 to 6 inch piece and a 4-inch to 2-inch piece. And then I'm going to have a great chunk of ruin that I'm also going to use for scatter. Waste not, want not, YouTube. I was really hesitant to do this step at the start, but once I got going, it was a ton of fun. Just kind of ruining these walls on purpose. So, don't worry about it. Have some fun, and if you ruin it in a way you don't like, you can always make more. That's probably the best part about this project. Even as I'm finishing this video, I'm already planning more pieces. This particular piece creates one of my favorite pieces of scatter. I'm going to do 2 inches on the top from both sides down to 4 inches on the bottom from both sides. And this is going to leave this really cool middle 2-inch piece. And it's just going to create this awesome piece of scatter. I put it on a little stand, and it's just this little ruined wall section. It's the perfect piece to go with the rest of your modular set. It can help extend the wall or just add some really cool cover for any kind of NPC or player character that needs some cover. You can see me carving in between the bricks of my texture work, just in an attempt to add a realistic look to the ruin. There it is, my favorite piece of scatter. Oh my gosh, I love it. I glued a fender washer down to some chip, and then glued it to the fender washer and chip. And now I'm going to show you briefly me doing the same thing with some of these other offcuts. Got some great ruined wall pieces. I'm just gonna arrange them on the chip with some nice fender washers for weight. And this is a great way to add some scatter that goes perfectly with the rest of the terrain. Some nice crumbled wall sections for our heroes and villains to hide behind in times of battle and war. On some of the pieces of scatter, I even took some of that leftover floor piecing, some of that grid work, and added that to the scatter as well. And I'm really happy with these small pieces. Time to flock with some crafting sand, both the bases and the space in between those dollar store foam sheets. Just squeeze some of your Elmer's or white PVA glue, spread it around with a brush you don't care about so much, and sprinkle on that craft sand. Get the bases well covered, but don't forget that those dollar store pieces need some of that flocked crafting sand to hide the seams. It's going to go a long way and really help hide that ugly part of the project. Once the pieces have been flocked and the glue is dried, cover them with your black Magic Craft base coat, half black acrylic paint, half matte Mod Podge. Once that was done and they were safe, I hit them with a gray primer. Then to make them look very interesting, I thought I'd go into with the trim and hit that trim up with Apple Barrel's khaki color. I'm going to paint all the trim work with khaki. The trim work around the doors, the trim work around the windows, and the pillars, and the top of the walls as well. With the trim work done, I wanted to try something a little different. So I picked 3 interesting earth shades: Apple Barrel's Caramel, Americana's Mississippi Mud, and Apple Barrel's Burnt Umber. And I would go in and paint individual bricks along the texture. Not too many, but just enough to imply that the bricks were made from different stones, different areas nearby, and just to add another interesting, colorful visual punch to this project. A project that I absolutely knew I would use constantly. Then it was time for an overbrush of granite gray, and I'm just going to hit everything with it, including the khaki bits. This is going to bring the colors closer together and make them look like they belong together. Don't forget to get all your parts. I know it's easy to focus on those walls, but don't forget your pillars. They're a key component to this project. And you're also going to need to do your floor and ceiling pieces as well. And then it's time for the black wash. This is a new version of my homemade wash. I don't know if I like it. It looks really good going on. I was really happy with the immediate results. It was sinking down in between the bricks and really making my texture roller texture absolutely pop. But when it dried, everything dried very, very dark. All that hard work I had spent on those individual stones and the trim work faded a bit. I'm not going to say the work was wasted. It absolutely was not. Even now, with the pieces completely done, you can still see the individual colored bricks. So that was not wasted time. But if this wash hadn't gone on so dark, that would have been okay too. But that's all right. We'll fix it. Don't you worry. Here's some of the pieces laying out after the black wash. They darkened quite a bit, and I wanted to pop my contrast between the trim and the stone walls. So, back to that khaki color, and this time I'm just going to do a generous dry brush. I know it looks like I'm painting full coverage. I am not. It's just a very, very generous dry brush across all that trim again. It was more work than I had anticipated doing with the painting, but that's all right. The wash darkened things just a little too much, and this is my way of pulling back in some of those colored details. Of course, the trim wasn't the only part that got a little too dark. So using my granite gray, I hit the brickwork with a very, very light dry brush. This popped all the bricks out, made the texture look absolutely fantastic. You can see the dark gray becomes the mortar between the stones, and you still get to see the little pops of different color from the earlier painting. So I was really, really pleased with how everything turned out. Afterward, it was just a matter of getting all these pieces seal coated. I used a clear matte sealer because you don't want people's fingerprints to damage the pieces. And now I'm going to let you check out this time lapse of me enjoying all my hard work and really putting this project through its paces. You can go from one massive structure in the middle of the table. I've even got some pieces left over. Or you can break it down and do several different pieces of ruin, creating an entire table's worth of terrain. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not difficult to do. It takes minutes. It takes minutes to have this stuff set up. You've got to try this project. I have my plans and templates on DriveThruRPG. I'm going to put a link in the description of this video. They are absolutely free for you to download and use with my wishes and blessing. But if you feel like I've done a great job, if you like this video, if you like this project, and you want to help me grow my channel, $1, $2, $5 for the plans would really help me out, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now I'm just going to show off all my hard work. Some close-ups of a completely modular magnetic terrain system. That's right, I'm calling it a system because I'm already planning additions. Oh, and there's my favorite little piece of scatter. With just a few more pillars, a couple more wall sections, you could go even bigger, YouTube. And of course, it wouldn't be a broken terrain video without an incredible setup. I've got Tinley, my wizard, and her war band, the Shamrock Boys. And they've heard there was some treasure at this ruin, and they're here to collect. But oh no, a necromancer has gotten there first. Tinley, rally your boys, kill some undead, and secure that treasure. Oh, I love it. YouTube, I love it. You gotta try this one. As always, like each other, love each other, and craft on.